I have the batteries charged up to 36 volts now. They're not totally charged. Some of them could have a little bit more topping charge on them, but it's got enough charge in there that if this is going to work, it's going to work. Now, right now I have the speed controller wired up. It's my hypothesis that the speed controller is bad, and so I think that in fact nothing is going to happen here. Now, just in case something does happen here, I do have the rear wheels jacked up, so in theory it shouldn't go anywhere. So right now I'm getting no response, not even the solenoid clicking, and that could be because the main switch is off or because it's in neutral. So I think that's the key. They took the key out and put in a switch. So now I think, let's see what happens. Still no response at all, and no response from the solenoid either. That could be because I'm not actually in gear. So let's try putting it in gear. I don't know if that's forward or reverse, but it doesn't matter too much right now. Still a whole lot of nothing. Let's try putting the switch the other way. Well, so far a whole lot of disappointment. The fact that I'm not getting any noise from the solenoid is a little concerning, so I'm going to look into see why that could be. I think there are two reasons, at least two reasons, why the car won't even engage the solenoid. One is I think this wire needs to be hooked up somewhere, although it's not clear where yet. These ends go on the batteries, and these ends tie into the rest of the electrical system that engages the solenoid, except I don't actually know physically where these ends are supposed to end up. The other problem is that we can see going into this diode here, this wire here that's supposed to plug in there is broken, and so that's definitely no good either. That is all the time I can dedicate to this project today, so let's move on to something else. I'm done sanding the boat, and after I sanded it, I wiped it down with the denatured alcohol. That was in part to get the dust off, and then in part just to get any oil and grease from my hands off. So I'm being careful not to touch it now that it's all clean, because that grease and oil can interfere with the ability of the epoxy I'm about to put on to form a proper bond. So what I'm going to do now is come in and I'm going to start here and try to fill in this area here with some thickened epoxy and some of the larger areas, and then I'm also going to see if the thickened epoxy I'm using can fill in the small holes. There's a lot of ways to thicken epoxy, and I'm going to be starting with the 405 wood flour, which is not rated for doing fairing, but it is rated for general purpose bonding and other things, and gap filling. And so since I'm trying to do gap filling in these areas, I think it'll be a good choice for there. And then we'll see if I can get it to go in the small holes here, or if I need to switch to like the 407 or the 410, something that's a little lighter and maybe it will go in there more easily. Or maybe I'll find that I just have to put unthickened stuff in there. We'll see. It's all an experiment. So I've mixed up I'm using the slow hardener here in the 105, and then I've mixed a bunch of the wood flour in. I've mixed it pretty thick because I'm going to be applying it on this surface, and I don't want it to run down the side and sag. So I wanted to make it thick enough that when I put it in there, it's going to stay put. So I'm not really seeing any movement here on my popsicle stick. So I'm going to say that when I put it in this crack, it's hopefully going to stay still, which is only one way to find out. So now I'm just going to try to fill this crack in. There are two things that I learned from doing all of that sanding. Maybe there's more than two things, but at least two things that I learned from doing all that sanding is one, sanding is no fun, so the more I can clean off any extraneous stuff now, the happier I'm going to be later. The other thing is that a lot of my air bubbles were caused by this being a very sharp break here. And so I want to try to do what I can to try to round this out before I put on the next layer of fiberglass, so I don't have that strong, sharp angle to try to get over. Now, I'm not sure that there's really any way I can put this filler in to make it nice and rounded, so probably to round it, I'm going to put stuff in and then come back with a little sander of some sort, probably the random orbital sander to try to round it out. But anything I can do to make things more round during this filling phase will certainly make me happy later. In addition to filling the large gaps like this, I also want to know if this stuff is going to work on the small holes and the extra small holes. So I'm just going to try to see what I can do to smush this in here and ferret out nice and good right now. So I guess I don't really know if it's getting into the holes there. It at the very least is covering them up again. Certainly it must be getting into the larger holes. And I don't have a good way to evaluate if it's getting into the smaller ones. I think I would have to let it dry and then sand it off to see what really happened underneath. And I'm definitely not going to do that. So the third thing that I can do with this, you saw me fill in big gaps here, or at least try to. Fill in big gaps here. And then you saw me fill in small holes. There's also places where when I use the sander, I got little valleys or just other irregularities. And I can also try to fill that in to create a nice, smooth, level surface all around. So I'm going to monkey around with this stuff for a while, and I'll be back. So I have the thickened epoxy. You can pretty much see where I did it. I feel like maybe that was a little too thick. It is staying in place, which is good, but it was so thick that when I tried to smooth it out, it would actually stick to the areas I was dragging and pull out stuff that was already down where I wanted it. So I might try doing it a little bit thinner next time, or maybe I'll try using a different filler. We'll see.